Sometimes a morning in the suburbs of Long Beach, where the palm trees sway lazily in the warm Californian breeze and the ocean somewhere in the distance whispers its eternal secrets, begins not with an inspiring sunrise, but with a banal ticking alarm clock that pulls you out of sleep, as if reminding you that life is not a romantic walk on the beach, but a routine where every day is like the previous one, only with new wrinkles around the eyes and a fresh portion of coffee so as not to fall asleep at the wheel. Kevin Long, a typical 40-something American with a light gray in his hair and a belly that was once flat from the occasional jog and now hints at a fondness for In-N-Out burgers, woke up just like that to the insistent beeping of his old iPhone, which was lying on his nightstand, covered in dust and a stack of unread gardening magazines he'd bought in the hopes of someday turning their backyard into an oasis with a grill and lounge chairs. He was 41, but in his heart he still felt like that college kid who dreamed of the simple life. A house with an ocean view, weekend barbecues with friends where steaks sizzled on the grill and beer flowed freely, and none of that corporate drama where bosses demanded reports and coworkers schemed behind your back. Kevin worked for a small-IT firm in downtown Long Beach, where his days were spent behind a monitor, debugging software for local businesses. Nothing heroic, just a steady paycheck that paid the mortgage on their modest two-story house in a neighborhood where neighbors still greeted each other, but no longer invited them to parties like they had in their youth. He stretched, his joints creaking. It was age, he thought with a little sadness, remembering how at 30 he could wake up after a sleepless night and feel as fresh as a daisy, and now every morning he began by mentally counting how many years he had until retirement, and wondering why his life hadn't turned out the way he'd planned back when he'd met Sarah at frat parties at UCLA. Sarah, his wife, was lying next to him, but she was already up, or rather, on the yoga mat in the living room, where the early light filtered through the blinds, casting streaks across her perfectly toned body, clad in hot pink leggings and a top that showed off everything she'd worked so hard to sculpt in the gym. Sarah Long, at 36, was what America calls a fitness goddess, not just a woman who takes care of herself, but a true influencer whose TikTok videos of her morning workouts racked up thousands of views, and whose OnlyFans account brought in extra income that she spent on new gadgets for streaming and organic smoothies from Whole Foods. Her hair, the color of ripe wheat, was always styled in a perfect ponytail. Her makeup was minimal but accentuated her high cheekbones and bright blue eyes, and her smile was the one that made her followers like and comment, dreaming of the same energy in their own lives. But at home, in their cozy but slightly run-down home, with a kitchen where the cupboards were stocked with processed foods for Kevin and superfoods for her, Sarah often seemed distant, like a star on a smartphone screen, living in her own world of likes and stories, where reality was filtered through a camera and real conversations were replaced by quick chats with fans. Kevin sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing his eyes, and looked around the bedroom. The pastel-colored walls they'd picked out together 10 years ago when they'd bought the house, dreaming of children and family dinners, but children had never come careers, or not the time yet, or simply life had taken its toll, with its crises and routine, where romance had died under the weight of bills and fatigue. There was a wedding photograph on the dresser, him in a tuxedo, smiling broadly, her in a white dress, glowing as if the world were at their feet. But now it seemed like a relic from another time, when trust was absolute and betrayal was the stuff of Hollywood movies, not something that could touch them. He stood up, put on his usual khakis and the plaid shirt Sarah had once picked out for him at Macy's, saying it made him look like a real Californian, and headed into the kitchen, where the smell of freshly brewed coffee already wafted in the air, not the fancy stuff you get at Starbucks, but the regular Mr. Coffee machine they'd bought at a neighbor's garage sale. The kitchen was the heart of their home, granite countertops slightly scratched from summer cookouts, a refrigerator covered with magnets from their trips Disneyland, the Grand Canyon, even one from Vegas, where they'd celebrated their 5th anniversary, and a cupboard filled with chips, reminders of the times they'd dined together instead of each other on their own gadgets. "Morning sunshine," Kevin muttered, pouring himself a cup of coffee in a mug that read, "World's Best Husband," a Valentine's Day gift from Sarah a couple of years ago, but she didn't even turn around, standing by the window with her phone in her hands, filming an Instagram story, probably something about morning motivation or how to start the day with positivity. She was in her element, the camera capturing her smile, her lithe movements as she demonstrated simple exercises, commenting under her breath, "Hey guys, today we're talking about how balance in life helps you stay in shape. Remember, the body is a temple, and you are its priestess." Kevin smiled to himself, remembering how her enthusiasm had once been infectious to him, making him run along the beach in the morning. But now it seemed distant, like a memory from school holidays. He preferred oatmeal with a banana and watching the news on CNN, thinking about how a midlife crisis was creeping up on him, with questions like, "What if this is all I get?" He put the bowl of oatmeal in the microwave, pressed the button, and while it was whirring, sat down at his desk. Scrolling through his emails on his phone. Work was urgent. Boss David Hines had already sent a reminder about the weekly report, with his typical, "Come on, Kev, don't let the team down." David was a real character, a Musliman with biceps that he pumped at the gym next door, always wearing tight polos that emphasized his athletic build, and a smile that seemed too self-assured to Kevin, like a guy who knows the world revolves around him. At 45, David was already a manager, with a bigger house and a more expensive car, and Kevin sometimes envied him, not in an angry way, but with a slight melancholy, wondering why he himself did not rush up the career ladder, preferring stability to risk. The oatmeal squeaked, and Kevin pulled out a bowl, adding milk and a sliced banana, his usual breakfast, simple and predictable, like his life, where every day began with this routine and ended with him watching Netflix on the couch while Sarah scrolled in her room. "Sarah, do you want some coffee? I made some fresh," he asked, trying to get her attention, but she just nodded, her eyes glued to the screen, her voice cheerful in her stories. "And remember, subscribe to my OnlyFans for exclusive workouts, all for your own personal growth." Kevin sighed, feeling a twinge of jealousy, not at the fans, but at the way her world had become separate from theirs, where family obligations like eating breakfast together took a back seat and Sarah's personal growth meant hours at the gym and online chats, leaving him with questions about trust. What if there was more to her stories than just a business? But he pushed the thought away, reminding himself that paranoia wasn't for him. He wasn't the type to rummage through his phones, preferring to take people's word for it, like in the good old days when moral dilemmas were resolved over dinner conversation rather than through apps. He finished his oatmeal, rinsed out his bowl, and grabbed the keys to his old Honda Civic, a car that had served him faithfully for a decade, with scratches from parking in front of the office and an "I Heart California" bumper sticker from those road trips up the coast when he and Sarah would just get in and drive, talking about their dreams. "I'm out of here, see you tonight," he called, but all he got was a laugh on her Instagram story, aimed at the audience and not at him. Kevin stepped outside, where the morning was already picking up steam. Neighbors were watering their lawns, a school bus was honking on the corner, and Mrs. Waller, an elderly neighbor with gray hair pulled back into a bun and always wearing a flowered apron, waved at him from her garden, where she was busy tending roses. "Morning, Kevin. Don't forget about Matt's barbecue on Saturday. He promised his ribs," she called out with a smile, and Kevin nodded, smiling back. Mrs. Waller was one of those old ladies who remembered every birthday in the neighborhood and was always willing to share a recipe or advice, although later in the evening she would become much more important in their lives. But for now, she was just a background, like the palm trees and the ocean breeze. He got into the car, started the engine, and drove along the familiar road past the neat houses with American flags, through the park where joggers ran under the palm trees, and on to the office downtown, where the high-rises of Long Beach reminded them of the big world beyond their suburb. But halfway there, as he sped down the highway with the radio playing an old Bruce Springsteen hit, Kevin slapped himself in the forehead, his laptop. He'd left it at home on the kitchen table, next to his empty oatmeal bowl, because in his haste he'd only thought of his coffee and keys. "Damn it again," he muttered, turning around at the nearest exit, feeling a wave of irritation wash over him. This wasn't the first time his routine had failed him, and he wondered if this was a sign of a relationship crisis, where small forgetfulness masked larger problems, like the way Sarah increasingly ignored him, preferring the virtual world to the real one. He got home faster than he'd left, parking in the garage with the idea that he'd just grab the laptop and drive away without disturbing Sarah, who was probably still on her stream. The door was unlocked. They lived in a quiet neighborhood, where locks were a thing of the past, and Kevin walked in quietly, hearing her voice from the bedroom upstairs. Not the cheerful tone for stories, but something more intimate, with a slight chuckle and pauses, like a conversation with someone close. He paused at the foot of the stairs, his heart pounding, not from fear, but from that intuition that whispers of social dilemmas when trust is cracking and you're on the brink of a discovery that could change everything. He climbed quietly and walked to the half-open bedroom door, where Sarah was sitting on the bed in her leggings, her phone to her ear. No, it was a stream, but not a regular one, a private chat, judging by her tone. Oh, big_Haints, you always know how to make me laugh. Yeah, these workouts are exclusive to you, for special subscribers only. Tell me, what are you doing at the office today? I hope you're not too tired with all these reports. Her voice was playful, with the intonation Kevin remembered from their early dates, when flirting was their love language, and now it was addressed to someone named Big_Haints. Kevin felt the world shrink. Big_Haints was David Haynes, his boss, the hunky hunk with the cocky grin who followed her on OnlyFans, and now, apparently, their interactions had moved beyond likes and comments. He stood there, outside the door, listening to her giggle at his joke about working out in the conference room, and pondered the moral dilemmas. Was this just business, a flirtation to keep followers, or was this the beginning of something bigger, where age was pushing Sarah to seek excitement outside the routine of their marriage? Trust, he thought, was a fragile thing, like the wedding photo on the dresser, and now it was cracking, forcing him to consider personal growth, whether it was time to change, not just dream about barbecues. But instead of barging in, Kevin quietly went downstairs, grabbed his laptop, and walked out, feeling the melancholy of his life's satire. A husband returning for a forgotten item and finding his wife flirting with her boss. A classic black comedy where the domestic drama unfolds in the suburbs under the palm trees. He got into his car, started the engine, and drove to the office, pondering his family responsibilities. Is it worth fighting for a relationship where one lives in reality and the other in the virtual world? Or is this just a crisis that will pass like morning fog over the ocean? On the way, he called Matt, his best friend, a former IT specialist who is now, in his 40s, an unemployed rebel cook, experimenting with recipes in his apartment and dreaming of opening a food truck with revolutionary burgers. Hey, Matt, you're not going to believe what you just heard, Kevin began, but his friend interrupted. Tell me about it over the barbecue on Saturday, man. In the meantime, take a deep breath. Life's too short for drama. And Kevin laughed, though it came out bitter as coffee without sugar, knowing that this was just the beginning, with questions about trust and growth only gaining momentum in their California suburb. At the office, David met him as if nothing had happened. Kev, are you late? It's okay. The main thing is to prepare the report. By the way, have you seen your wife's new video? She's the bomb. And Kevin nodded, smiling through force, feeling how life's satire hit him in the gut. A boss flirting with his subordinate's wife is a classic of American society, where social dilemmas are disguised as friendly jokes. The day passed in the routine of codes and meetings, but thoughts about betrayals were spinning in his head, not physical, but emotional, where age pushes you to search for novelty, and how to save a family in a world where OnlyFans has become the norm. In the evening, returning home, Kevin stopped at a cafe on the beach, ordered a latte, and looked at the waves, thinking about personal growth. Maybe it's time to talk to Sarah for real, without screens, or will this only worsen the crisis? But for now, he just sat there, feeling melancholy, like in those movies where the heroes find answers in the ocean. But in reality, everything is more complicated. At home, Sarah greeted him with dinner, a quinoa and chicken salad, her signature healthy option, and smiled. How's your day, honey? I gained 1,000 new followers today. Kevin nodded, sitting down at the table, and began to talk about work, avoiding the topic, but inside a storm of questions raged. Is this trust or blindness? Their dialogue flowed naturally, like a middle-aged couple. David is pressuring me with reports again, he said, and she replied. He seems like a cool guy. He always comments positively on my posts. Kevin swallowed a lump in his throat, thinking about moral dilemmas, but the evening passed peacefully, with them watching a series on Netflix, sitting next to each other, but their thoughts were far away. And only at night, lying awake, he thought about the future, where age-related changes force you to rethink everything, and how to find room for growth in their domestic drama without destroying the family. Picture a typical California evening in suburban Long Beach, when the sun has already dropped below the horizon, leaving the sky in shades of orange and purple, as if an impressionist painter decided to experiment with a palette, and the air is still warm, infused with the salt of the ocean and the aroma of barbecue from neighbors who apparently decided that Friday was an excuse for an impromptu backyard party, with strings of lights and laughter drifting through the fences, a reminder of how life in these places moves slowly, but with a subtext where under the surface of calm there are always little dramas bubbling, like those unfolding in houses like Kevin and Sarah's, where the veneer of the perfect American family masks the cracks in the foundation of relationships that have been accumulating for years, like dust in the corners that no one notices until it's too late. Kevin Long, the eternal dreamer of a simple life with beer and a barbecue on the weekends, came home from work a little earlier than usual, feeling drained after a day of endless Zoom meetings and coding, where every bug in the system seemed like a metaphor for his own life, small but annoying, and requiring a fix that he put off, as well as conversations with Sarah about how their marriage seemed to be slipping into a routine, where age-related changes manifest themselves not only in gray hair and extra pounds, but also in emotional distance when spouses live under the same roof, but in parallel universes, one of which is office reports and dreams of retirement, and the other is a world of likes, stories, and virtual flirtations, where personal growth is measured not by the depth of feelings, but by the number of subscribers. He parked his Honda in the garage, noticing that Sarah's car, her bright red Mini Cooper, bought a couple of years ago on the heels of her blog's success, was still there, with a Fit Life bumper sticker that had always made him smile, remembering how she'd coaxed him to run on the beach together, but now it was a memory that was slightly sad because their shared activities had been reduced to occasional dinners in front of the TV, where conversations about the day devolved into monologues about her content and his work, without the sparkle of their youth. Kevin walked into the house quietly, kicking off his shoes at the door and wearing only his socks, the same gray ones with the hole in the big toe that he wore around the house, because comfort was more important than style, especially after a long day at the office, where David Hines, his boss, always showed up in perfectly tailored jeans and a polo shirt that showed off his muscular frame, earned through hours in the gym, and with that cocky demeanor that made Kevin feel a little out of place, like he was still that intern and not a 40-year-old professional with experience, pondering social dilemmas like why some guys, like David, seemed forever young and successful, while others, like himself, were struggling with a midlife crisis, where family responsibilities, the mortgage, the bills, supporting his wife in her career weighed down like an invisible weight, forcing him to wonder if it was all worth it, or if it was time to seek personal growth in something new, like a hobby or even the therapy he was talking about. Matt, his friend, had been saying this for a month now, calling it an investment in mental health. He was wearing shorts old, faded from washing, with the UCLA logo on them, reminiscent of his college days, when life had seemed like an endless adventure rather than a series of routine days, and he headed to the kitchen to get a bottle of water from the fridge, planning to go upstairs later, take a shower, and maybe ask Sarah to order pizza to ease the tension from that morning's eavesdropping incident, which was still playing in his head like a broken record, making him waver between trust and suspicion, because in the individualist American society, moral dilemmas like flirting on social media are often written off as, it's just business. But deep down, Kevin knew that it could be a symptom of something bigger, a relationship in crisis, where one partner is evolving and the other is staying the same. But instead of the kitchen, he froze in the hallway, hearing Sarah's voice from the living room, not the usual cheerful tone for her morning stories, but something more intimate with a slight giggle and pauses, like in a private chat where words are chosen not for the public, but for someone special, and it made his heart skip a beat, because after the morning discovery about Big_Haints, he could not just pass by, ignoring the signals as he did before, preferring peace in the family to confrontation, but now curiosity mixed with confusion, pushing him to an impulsive step, which in the black comedy of life could become a joke for friends, but in reality responded with a melancholic satire on how adults who have crossed 40 suddenly find themselves in situations worthy of teenage dramas. The living room was their shared space, a couch with nautical throw pillows that reminded him of the beaches of Long Beach, a coffee table with a stack of Sarah's fitness magazines and his Xbox remote that he sometimes turned on to take his mind off work, and a large closet against the wall, piled high with old photo albums and boxes of Christmas decorations, behind which you could hide if you tried really hard, and Kevin, feeling like an idiot in shorts and socks, did just that, slipping quietly behind the closet, pressing himself against the wall where the dust tickled his nose slightly, and the bottle of water in his hand felt suddenly heavy, like proof of his own stupidity, because hiding in your own house from your wife was the height of domestic drama, where trust gives way to paranoia, and you suddenly realize that age-related changes include not only physical aging, but also emotional vulnerability, when the fear of loss makes you do things you later regret. Sarah was sitting on the couch, her back to him, her phone on a tripod, lit by the soft glow of a lamp they'd bought at IKEA a couple of years ago, on one of those trips that seemed romantic at the time, but now looked like routine, her hair down, a light top and yoga shorts that accentuated the figure she so proudly showed off in her videos, her voice flowing, with the kind of intonation that wasn't meant for the masses, but for one listener. Oh, Big_Haints, your ideas are always so inspiring. Tell me more about this protein fantasy. It sounds like the perfect post-workout recipe, especially when mixed with your muscle-building tips. Kevin paused, feeling a chill run down his spine, a protein fantasy. This wasn't just fitness talk, it sounded like flirtation, veiled as professional conversation, but with an undertone that made his imagination paint pictures that he wanted to turn away from, and at that moment, straining his ears, he heard a response from the other side, a male voice, painfully familiar, with that cocky intonation that echoed around the office. "Sarah, honey, imagine chocolate protein powder mixed with banana and peanut butter, but with your signature twist, add a little spice to warm up the atmosphere. I tried it yesterday after the gym, thought of you." And then it hit Kevin like an electric shock. Big_Haints. This is David Haynes, his boss, the same one who had been patting him on the shoulder at the office today, saying, "Good job, Kev, but hurry up with the reports." And now flirting with his wife under a pseudonym that sounds like a nickname from the gym, and this realization hit him like a wave on the beach, washing away the last of his trust, forcing him to think about moral dilemmas. What if this is not just a subscription, but something more, where social networks erase the boundaries between work, home, and personal, turning life into a satire, where a husband hides behind a closet, listening to his wife discuss fantasies with his boss. He stood there in his shorts and socks, feeling like a comical character in a sitcom, but with a melancholy undertone, because it wasn't funny, it was painful, to realize that a relationship crisis could be triggered not by a fight, but by a quiet drift in different directions, with Sarah seeking excitement in the virtual world and him clinging to family obligations like a life preserver, thinking about the personal growth that might require not hiding but speaking up. But the fear of conflict paralyzed him, as did the bottle of water in his hand, which he clutched tighter and tighter until, shit, it slipped, hitting the floor with a thud, and the water splashed onto the carpet, the same one they'd picked out together at Home Depot, dreaming of cozy nights in. It wasn't loud, but in the quiet of the living room, it sounded like a gunshot, and Sarah jumped, her voice breaking off mid-sentence. "Wait, Bigged. I mean, David, I think something fell. Wind, probably the window is open." She quickly turned off the feed, the screen went blank, and Kevin heard her standing up, footsteps approaching, but the closet was hiding him in shadow, and he held his breath, feeling like a complete idiot, because at that moment the whole satire of the situation came crashing down. A grown man in shorts hiding from his wife, dropping a bottle like a bad comedy, but with an undertone of drama where trust is broken not by betrayal, but by omission. Sarah walked past, looked out the window, muttered, "Strange, the wind is calm today. Okay, maybe the neighbor's cat is snooping around again," and returned to the couch, but did not resume the chat, instead sighing and stretching, as if thinking about something of her own, and Kevin, taking advantage of the moment, slipped quietly from behind the closet, walking on the balls of his feet on the carpet, his heart pounding as if after a long abandoned run, and walked out into the hallway and then out into the street, unnoticed, like a ghost in his own life. He sat on the porch steps, looking out at the evening suburb, where the lights of the houses twinkled like stars, and thought in complete confusion, what now? David is bigged_Haints, flirting with a protein fantasy that sounds innocent but cuts to the quick, making you think about the changes of age, when at 36 Sarah is still full of energy, looking for adventures on the internet, and he, at 41, dreams of a barbecue, and this discrepancy pushes you into a crisis, where family responsibilities seem like a burden, and moral dilemmas like whether to confront or ignore circle in your head like moths around a lamp. Mrs. Waller, their neighbor, came down the street with a basket of vegetables from her garden and waved at him. "Kevin, dear, you look as if you've seen a ghost. Is everything all right? Would you like some tea and biscuits? I've just baked some." He forced a smile as he replied, "Thank you, Mrs. Waller, just tired after work. But the tea idea sounds tempting, maybe another time." She nodded as she left, and Kevin thought about how in this American suburb, neighbors like her were a bastion of stability, but even they couldn't help in dilemmas where personal growth required the courage to admit the problem. He called Matt, his friend, who was currently experimenting with recipes in his apartment-turned-makeshift kitchen, and when he answered, Kevin let out a breath. "Matt, dude, you're not going to believe it. It's David, my boss, flirting with Sarah online. I just overheard him. In shorts, behind the closet, like an idiot." Matt laughed, but with a hint of sympathy. "Seriously? In shorts? Classic Kev. But listen, don't get too cocky, think about the trust issue. Maybe it's just chatter. Remember how I did it with my ex? The chat flirtation turned out to be nothing, but the row ruined everything. Let's meet tomorrow at a cafe by the ocean, have coffee. We'll discuss it. Life's too short for paranoia." Kevin nodded, even though his friend couldn't see, and hung up, feeling melancholy. The black comedy of life, where the husband hides, drops the bottle, leaves in confusion. But maybe this is a chance for growth, for a conversation that will change everything. As the evening wore on, Kevin returned to the house, pretending he had just arrived, and Sarah greeted him with a smile. "Honey, your late dinner's on the stove, quinoa salad, just the way you like it." They ate, chatting about small things, her new video, his report, but questions bubbled beneath the surface, and Kevin wondered how to balance this domestic drama without destroying the family. The night brought restless sleep, with thoughts of the future, where the crisis might be the catalyst for something better, or the end of everything. Kevin Long, the typical office worker with a slight stoop from endless hours at the computer and eyes that were increasingly showing a shadow of weariness from a routine that had once seemed stable, but now felt like a cage of daily reports and silences at home, decided it was time to speak out, because after that evening behind the cabinet, when the bottle of water had treacherously slipped from his hands and Sarah's words about a protein fantasy with David echoed in his head, he couldn't just swallow it like a bitter pill and continue to pretend that everything was fine in their suburban house under the palm trees of Long Beach, where the ocean breeze brought no relief, but only a reminder of how life was slipping through his fingers, leaving questions about trust that had been accumulating for years like unpaid bills in a drawer. He dialed Matt, his old friend, the same exit guy who, after being fired from a big corporation, decided that the world needed his culinary experiments, turning his small apartment into a chaotic laboratory of tastes, where the cupboards were filled with spices from Asian markets, and the refrigerator was bursting with ingredients for revolutionary dishes, like burgers with kimchi and avocado, and Matt, with his eternal optimism, tinted with a slight irony about his own unemployment, immediately suggested meeting not at their usual cafe by the beach, but at his place because, as he said on the phone with a characteristic chuckle, I just have a new recipe brewing a chili with a secret that will blow your taste buds and at the same time your brain if you have something to share. Kevin agreed, relieved to finally get it all out in the open, because keeping his suspicions about his wife's flirtations with his boss inside was like carrying a backpack of rocks that grew heavier every day, forcing him to think about relationship crises where age-related changes manifest not only in the mirror, but also in the way partners drift apart, seeking excitement in the virtual world, while the real home becomes the backdrop for a domestic drama full of omissions and moral dilemmas about whether to fight for the family or admit that some cracks can no longer be repaired. Matt lived in a small apartment on the outskirts of Long Beach, in a complex where the pool was always full of kids on weekends, and the parking lot was filled with pickup trucks and bikes. And when Kevin knocked on the door, the smell of spices hit his nose like a greeting from an old friend, and Matt answered in an apron stained with sauce, his hair disheveled, and a smile that said, "Life is chaos, but delicious." "Come on in, Kev. Don't just stand there like a statue. The chili's almost done, and the beer's in the fridge. Go get it. You know where it is," Matt said, clapping him on the shoulder with the kind of friendly force that was reminiscent of their college days, coding together at night over pizza and energy drinks, dreaming of big projects, and now one of them was stuck in a corporate rut, and the other was experimenting with life like a recipe, adding whatever came to hand, and the contrast made Kevin envy his friend, not in an angry way, but with a melancholy note, because Matt, at 40, seemed free of the family obligations that Kevin carried like a cross, contemplating personal growth that perhaps required not stability, but the courage to step into the unknown. They sat down at the kitchen table, littered with recipe pads and empty energy drink cans. Matt still did some freelancing in it, but mostly for fun, and Kevin poured himself a beer from a bottle labeled as a local craft beer and began to tell the story, starting with that morning's return to the laptop, when he overheard Sarah flirting with big_Haints, and continuing with the evening eavesdropping behind the cupboard, where the protein fantasy revealed itself as a connection with David, his boss, the same Musliman who had seemed like an ambitious manager in the office, but now appeared as a rival, making Kevin feel like outdated code in a world where social media was rewriting the rules of relationships. Matt listened, stirring the chili on the stove where the meat was stewing with peppers and beans, adding flavor to their conversation, and his face changed from surprise to a smirk, because in his world, where unemployment gave free rein to creativity, such stories seemed not tragedies but fodder for a satirical plan, and when Kevin finished, exhaling, "I'm confused, Matt. It's like my life is a bug I can't fix, and now trust is in question and family responsibilities seem like a farce." His friend put down his spoon, sat down across from him, and said with that natural American directness, seasoned with irony, "Dude, is this a classic, the wife flirting with the boss on OnlyFans and the husband hiding behind the closet in shorts? Sounds like the plot of one of those Netflix shows where everything ends in either divorce or revenge." But seriously, Kev, get going. Hands, age-related changes, relationship crisis, all this bullshit if you don't take control. Let's get revenge smart. Let's create a fake fitness trainer account, one that will lure her subscribers, show David that the market is not only his, and at the same time give you personal growth, because it's time to pump up, bro, not only in code, but in the gym too. Kevin stared at him, choking on his beer, because the idea seemed absurd, like a black comedy where office plankton turns into an influencer, but at the same time tempting, because it could be a way to restore balance without causing a scandal at home, where Sarah continued to live in her world of streams, ignoring the growing gap, and he muttered, "Are you serious? I'm not a muscle man like David. I have a belly from a sedentary job, and mentally this is a deception, some kind of dilemma. Will I make it worse?" Matt laughed as he poured chili into bowls, steam rising and mixing with the scent of garlic and cumin, and slid one over to Kevin. "Fake. This is a business, Kev, like her OnlyFans, just a game on the field where everyone flirts for likes. Imagine this. You become GregFit74, born 74, to sound mature, like us, middle-aged, but with charm. I'll sign up for TikTok and Instagram, Write scripts for videos, easy workouts, motivational speeches, with an emphasis on real life for guys over 40 to lure Sarah and David's audience by showing that fitness isn't just for perfect bodies, but for regular dudes like us. And to get into character, start lifting weights you have an empty garage. Put in there some weights you bought a couple of years ago and forgot about, and film there. Authentic, unfiltered, to stand out from the gloss. Kevin chewed on the chili, which burned his tongue, just like his friend's idea, but there was something invigorating about the spicy taste, making him think about personal growth, not as an abstraction, but as an action, where a relationship crisis could be a catalyst for change, and he nodded, feeling a rush of adrenaline. Okay, let's try it, it won't hurt, and maybe it will help us understand ourselves, understand why Sarah is looking for attention elsewhere, and restore trust through revenge, which does not hurt, but teaches. They finished eating, and Matt, wiping his hands on his apron, grabbed his old laptop, the same one he'd once coded with Kevin on, and in a couple of minutes had registered an account, GregFit74, choosing an avatar with a silhouette of a man in a gym, promising to later replace it with a real photo of Kevin after his first workouts, and started scribbling out scripts. First video, how to start fitness after 40. No excuses. You say, "Hey guys, I'm Greg, a regular guy from California who's tired of the office routine and decided to take his body into his own hands. Join us, and we'll overcome this midlife crisis together." After dinner, Kevin returned home to find Sarah asleep, the light on in her streaming room, and he walked quietly into the garage, a space that had once been littered with moving boxes and old bikes that could now be his personal battlefield, with dusty weights waiting to be used. And the next day, skipping lunch at the office, he began lifting weights, following Matt's simple plan: push-ups, sit-ups, bicep curls, feeling his muscles protest after years of inactivity. But there was something cathartic about the sweat, as if he weren't just exercising his body, but rebooting his life. Reflecting on social dilemmas where revenge via a fake account seemed like a satire on the modern world full of virtual masks, and on family responsibilities that now included not only paying bills, but also defending his space from intruders like David. Matt arrived a couple days later with his smartphone camera and a tripod he'd borrowed from a neighbor, and they set up their first shoot in the garage, where the concrete floor was covered with a yoga mat he'd secretly borrowed from Sarah, and the lighting from an old lamp created an authentic, non-glossy look, and Kevin, wearing a new sweatshirt he'd picked up at Target on the way, stood in front of the camera, reciting Matt's script. "Hey guys, this is Greg Fit from Long Beach. Today we're talking about how a midlife crisis can be the start of something cool without the expensive membership fees right in your garage." The shoot was punctuated by laughter, Kevin stumbling, Matt joking, "Bro, relax, you're not at the Oscars, just be yourself, only cooler." And in the process, Kevin felt growth, not just muscular, but also internal, realizing that revenge is not evil, but a way to regain control, while the account gained its first views, and he pondered the moral aspects. What if this helps Sarah see that the world of fitness is broader than flirting with subscribers, and brings them back to a dialogue about trust? In the evenings, Kevin continued to work out, feeling his body change, his stomach tightening, his shoulders growing stronger, and it gave him a sense of strength that was missing in the relationship, where Sarah was increasingly lost in her own world, oblivious to his changes, and Matt sent him new scripts by email. The second video is Protein Without Fantasy, real recipes for busy guys, to tease David without him noticing, and Kevin filmed, edited on his old computer, uploaded to an account where the number of subscribers slowly grew, first a dozen, then 100, and there was something ironic in it, like a melancholic satire in which a programmer becomes a love coach for himself, luring away his wife's audience, not knowing where it will lead, but feeling that the crisis is a chance for rebirth. One evening after filming, he sat in the garage, sweaty and tired, thinking about the themes Matt had raised in their conversation. "It's not just revenge, Kev. It's growth. You're showing that life doesn't end at 40, it begins again." And Kevin nodded to himself, realizing that in this domestic drama, the garage had become a symbol of his transformation, where the social dilemmas of flirtation and deception intertwine with the search for meaning in family life. Sometimes in this crazy world of social media, where every other Long Beach suburbanite, like the ones who live in neat little houses with views of palm trees and the distant glitter of the ocean, suddenly decides that their lives are worthy of being broadcast to millions of screens, something completely unexpected happens, as if the algorithms of TikTok and Instagram conspired to play a prank on ordinary people, turning a humble office coder like Kevin Long into a fitness content star under the handle GregFit74, where his charisma, the same one he used to show only in jokes over barbecues with friends or in the rare arguments at work, suddenly shoots off like fireworks over the beach on Independence Day, gaining followers at such a rate that even Matt, that eternal experimenter with recipes and ideas, who edited videos in his apartment, turning raw footage from his garage into professional videos, where Kevin looked like a real expert in mindful body and soul, with deep thoughts about how exercise can help with midlife crises, couldn't believe his eyes, sitting at his old MacBook with the screen covered in food truck stickers, adding music with motivational beats, so that each video wasn't just about doing squats or push-ups, but telling a story about personal growth, where sweat and fatigue became a metaphor for struggling with everyday dilemmas like those that plague men in their 40s, balancing work, family, and the search for meaning in a world full of filters and fake smiles. Kevin, the guy who just a few weeks ago was barely lifting weights in his garage, where the walls were covered with old posters of 90s rock bands and instruments he'd bought at garage sales, but never used, now woke up in the morning to notifications on his phone, hundreds of new followers, comments like, "Greg, you're a real dude, not like those pumped-up robots at the gym," or "Your mindfulness tips are just what I needed after my divorce, thanks bro." And it made him feel a weird mix of guilt and triumph, because this whole plan with the fake account, intended as protein revenge for Sarah's flirtation with David, his boss, was now going beyond a simple joke and turning into something more, where the moral dilemmas of deceiving an audience were mixed with a genuine feeling that he was actually helping people by sharing his thoughts on how aging doesn't a sentence, but a chance to rethink life without leaving his own garage, which became his personal sanctuary with a rug on the floor, a stack of towels and bottles of water arranged like trophies. Matt, sitting in his makeshift editing room and alcove in the living room of his apartment, overlooking the parking lot where his neighbors parked their SUVs, and with stacks of cookbooks strewn around, would take raw clips of Kevin occasionally stumbling or rubbing his sweaty forehead and turn them into masterpieces, adding text to the screen like body awareness, listen to yourself, not to trends, or a soul in harmony is the key to true strength, making Kevin not just a fitness trainer, but a kind of guru for the middle class, those Americans who, like him, struggle with the routine of offices and suburbs, seeking personal growth in simple things like a morning jog on the beach or an after-work meditation. And it worked because, in an era when everyone is tired of perfect bodies and fake success stories, Kevin's authenticity, his slight slouch, his genuine laughter at his own mistakes, talk of family responsibilities as part of a fitness regimen for the soul-hooked people, making them share the video, comment, and even write private messages where they shared their stories of relationship crises, of trust crumbling under the weight of years. And Kevin, answering on behalf of GregFit, felt like a therapist, although in reality it was part of revenge. But with each passing day, the line was erased, turning the plan into something therapeutic for himself. Meanwhile, Sarah, the fitness goddess behind her TikTok and OnlyFans accounts, where she used to rack up thousands of views for her candid workouts, with smiles and poses that showed off her toned body, was starting to see a decline. Notifications were coming in less often, stats showed a loss of followers, especially the male ones who used to like every one of her stories, leaving comments like, "You're an inspiration, Sarah." And now, according to the analytics she checked at the kitchen table while sipping her organic avocado spinach smoothie, those fans were leaving for someone new, this GregFit74 she'd seen in her recommendations but hadn't paid attention to, thinking he was just another competitor in a sea of fitness influencers, unaware that the username was her own husband, who worked late in the garage in the evenings, supposedly fixing an old car, but in reality filming videos of himself talking about a real man. someone who balances body and soul without chasing after external glitz, and it was ironic that it hit her in the gut because her audience, looking for authenticity, found it in Kevin's content, leaving Sarah bewildered, forcing her to ponder the social dilemmas of influencerdom, where popularity is as ephemeral as the Californian fog over the ocean, and age-related changes in the industry require not only the perfect body, but also a depth that perhaps she lacked. Kevin pretended not to know anything, continuing his double life with the skill of a spy from the old movies. He and Sarah would sometimes watch on the weekends on the living room couch, munching popcorn and cuddling like they used to. But now those evenings were colored by his secret, as he nodded while she complained over dinner, a simple steak with vegetables that he grilled in the backyard, the aroma of smoke mixing with the evening breeze about how the engagement is down. Maybe the algorithms have changed again, or the competitors are dumping content. And he would answer with an innocent look. Maybe you just need a break, honey. Take a break. We could go to Santa Monica for the weekend, walk along the pier like we used to, suggesting it not only as a distraction, but with a genuine hope that such a trip might rekindle their connection, force them to talk about the trust that was cracking at the seams with her flirtation with David. But Sarah was shaking her head, saying, "No time, Kev. We need to film more to get the audience back. These new guys like Gregfit are stealing traffic. He's so authentic, I guess. He's talking about the soul, not just the muscles." And Kevin was jubilant inside, but outwardly shrugging, hiding a smile behind a sip of beer, reflecting on the dark comedy of a situation where his revenge was working better than expected, but also raising moral questions about whether he was overdoing it by poaching her fans, or if this was a fair lesson in how, in a world of social media, personal growth is more important than poses, and family responsibilities include being supportive, but not at the expense of oneself. At work, in the office, where the air conditioner hummed overhead and his colleagues pounded away at their keyboards, David Hines, the muscle-bound guy with the perpetual grin and the polo shirt that hugged his biceps, would come to his desk with reports, but now with a hint of irritation in his voice because, as Kevin learned from Matt, who was monitoring social media, David, too, was losing followers on his own account, where he posted photos from the gym with hashtags like #BossFit, which added to the satire. The boss who had flirted with an employee's wife was now suffering from that same employee's content without knowing it, and Kevin would respond to his, "Hey, Kev, do you have a report? And by the way, have you seen this Gregfit guy? He's typing, maybe I'll follow him," with a neutral, "Yeah, that sounds cool, boss," feeling a surge of confidence that was helping him cope with a relationship crisis at home. Matt, in his apartment, where the kitchen now adjoined an editing table strewn with empty coffee cups and notepads with video ideas, would call Kevin in the evenings when Kevin was sitting in the park by the ocean, watching the waves crash against the pier and discuss statistics. "Bro, you already have 5,000 followers. Your charisma has taken off. People write that your speeches about mindfulness change their outlook on life, on crises, on relationships, and Sarah has lost a couple of hundred in a week. Her comments are empty, and ours are boiling." And Kevin would answer, feeling a pang of conscience. "It's cool, but it's weird, Matt. Pretending is like living in a parallel reality. At home, I'm ordinary Kevin dreaming of barbecue, and online I'm a guru and morally. I don't know, maybe it's time to stop before I ruin everything." But his friend persuaded, "No, this is growth, dude. You show that a real man is not a jock like David, and whoever thinks about the soul, and this is a lesson for Sarah, let him see that the audience is moving towards authenticity, not flirtation." And in these conversations, Kevin reflected on the themes that were now woven into his videos. Trust in marriage as a foundation, crisis as an opportunity, age as wisdom, and this helped him himself, turning revenge into therapy. One evening, during a family gathering at Mrs. Waller's, she had invited the neighbors for tea and homemade cakes in her garden, where the roses were blooming in the evening sun, and the table was set under a canopy of garlands. Sarah was complaining to her neighbor, "My followers are going to this Gregfit. He's so sincere, he talks about the soul, and I guess I'm too superficial." And Mrs. Waller, with her gray hair and wise smile, was replying, "Darling, at our age, it's not just the body that's important, but the heart too. Maybe this is a sign to think about balance in life, in the family. And Kevin, sitting next to them with a cup of tea, was pretending to be sympathetic. Yeah, Sarah, maybe you could try adding depth to your videos, like this guy, hiding the fact that he was that guy, and this moment of black comedy made him think about moral dilemmas. Does pretense save or destroy? As the account grew, Kevin continued to film in the garage, but now he added elements of life walks on the beach in Long Beach, where he talked about ocean meditation, or trips to a nearby park, where he demonstrated outdoor exercises, and this variety of locations attracted even more people, while Sarah, in an attempt to regain an audience, filmed more candid videos in her home gym. But to no avail, her activity dropped, forcing her to be at home more often, cooking dinner with Kevin, and in these moments he saw glimmers of hope for restoring trust, although the pretense hung like the sword of Damocles, a reminder of the crisis that could explode at any moment. Matt edited with enthusiasm, adding effects, making Kevin an expert, and called, "Another 1,000, Kev, your revenge is working. But remember, it's not just about Sarah, it's about you, about growing up." And Kevin agreed, feeling his life changing, but with a melancholy edge, because in this satire of American suburbia, online success didn't solve offline problems, where family obligations demanded honesty. The evening dragged on, thick and Californian, the kind when you can't see the sea, but you can hear it, when the garage smells of rubber, dust, and fresh sweat. Kevin was reviewing the draft of the Protein Without Fantasy video, erasing unnecessary pauses, and suddenly his phone beeped. Your overnight delivery from Macrorush, arriving in 7-10 minutes. He remembered Matt had agreed on a barter, a box of new protein for an honest review. It would be nice to grab some himself while Sarah was setting up tomorrow's stream in her room with ring lights. The doorbell rang before the timer. Kevin almost ran to the porch and opened the door only the width of the chain. Yes, yes. On the threshold, a guy in a courier's jacket, a baseball cap, cheeks still adolescent, but shoulders already athletic. On the box, a sticker, Kevin Long. Hey, Mr. Long. Wow, you. The courier sat back on his heels, narrowing his eyes. Damn, you're that Gregfit. My girlfriend's crazy about you. The words flew out loudly, like a firecracker. Kevin jerked. SHH! He glanced over his shoulder, and from the depths of the house, Sarah called out, Kev, who's there? Delivery, he shouted urgently. Just protein. The courier smiled guiltily, but could no longer stop. By the way, I'm Tyler, intern for David Hines, well, your boss, and a part-time job in the evenings. Listen, brother, I didn't think you guys were so authentic in real life. The word Hines hit his nerves like a hand on a wet table. Kevin swallowed and stepped out onto the porch, closing the door tightly behind him. Let's do it this way, Tyler, he said quietly. You hand over the box, I'll sign for it, and we both pretend we didn't notice anything out of the ordinary, okay? Hey, no problem, Tyler nodded, lowering his voice. It's just, well, it's so cool. Lindsay watches your garage videos every morning and says you have real soul, unlike, he paused. Well, some people do. There were footsteps inside the house. Sarah was coming down the stairs. A light came on in the hallway. Kevin tensed up. The signature is here, he whispered, handing Tyler the stylus and the screen of the courier app. And let's, quickly. The footsteps stopped at the door. Kevin, do I need to sign something? Sarah asked from behind the door, her tone sweet but slightly wary. No, no, these are review samples, he shouted. I did it all myself. Tyler raised his eyebrows. Obser, he understood, so the seraphim was already blowing into the house. He poked the stylus, thought, and could not resist. By the way, at work we argue about who this Gregfit is. Hines, well, you're David, says it's some screenwriter from the studio, that authenticity is editing. But he looked Kevin over. His t-shirt was still damp from his workout, an ant-like dust print on his elbow. I don't think so. Kevin felt his ears warming up. A strange mixture of malice and shame stirred inside him. A writer from the studio. Well, of course, David prefers to believe that sincerity is also someone's project. Tyler, he said even more quietly, let's do it this way. You don't ask any more questions, and I'll. He opened the box, took out a shaker and a marker. I'll write to Lindsay a personal stay the course. Just no stories, okay? The boy's eyes flashed. Seriously, you're a legend, he caught himself. I mean, you just... Hey, thanks. The step creaked again behind the door. Kevin caught Tyler's eye and nodded toward the yard, as if to say, let's go around the house. The front walkway is like a stage. They slid toward the garage. Inside was a tripod, a rug, 2 dumbbells, and a blanket. Tyler stared at it as if it were a museum display case. Honestly, he whispered, now I'm absolutely sure. Kevin looked at his hands, at the lamp with its warm circle of light, at the microphone loop that Matt had lent him. The comical conspiracy in his own garage suddenly seemed both funny and fragile. It clicked in his head. Maybe it was time for at least one of the living people to call a spade a spade. Tyler, this is between you and me, okay? He held out the shaker. On the side he'd written, Lindsay, listen to yourself, not the trends. Gee, I'm not making a show of this in the office. And I don't want David. He searched for the word. To use this against me. Tyler nodded sharply. What are you talking about? I'm a grave. Okay, just nobody. And hey, honestly, everyone in the office is whispering about big_Haints. Like, it's cool that the boss supports the fitness culture, but my Lindsay says he's too active in the comments of one. Tyler waved his hand vaguely. Well, I don't want to pry. It's just, I don't think you're the only one playing with masks. The words hit home more than he'd intended. You're not the only one playing masks, was the whole suburban truth. Kevin nodded, his mouth dry. Listen, he said suddenly, you want some really useful advice? Don't do what David does. Not at work, not. Anywhere. If you love Lindsay, don't test your boundaries for likes. Tyler was embarrassed, but he smiled at the adults with a smile that was not meant to be funny. Okay, and thanks for the shaker. He glanced at the camera. Can we? 10 seconds of video for her, like a motivational piece, and I swear we won't post it anywhere. Kevin closed his eyes for a second, balancing between fear and some new confidence. Come on, he said, turning on the lamp and standing on the mat. Lindsay, this is Greg. Remember, perfection is the filter, progress is you. One day, one win. Stay the course. He clicked the record. That's it. Holy shit. Tyler clutched the shaker to his chest. Okay, I'm gone. And Mr. Long, it's cool that you're you. That's rare. When the door closed behind the courier, Kevin stood in the darkness, listening to the house. Somewhere upstairs, a switch clicked. Sarah came out into the hallway, barefoot, in a loose t-shirt, with a tired look on her face that the camera didn't like to show. Has he left already? She asked. He's gone, Kevin replied, trying to keep his voice even. They sent me something new. They wrote, natural banana flavor, no, fantasies. Sarah smiled at the corner of her lips, the way you smile when you don't believe an advertisement. Can you leave one jar in the kitchen? I'll check it in the smoothie tomorrow. She paused, peering into his face. Listen, why did the courier ask you to sign on the street? Kevin shrugged. New protocols. It's nighttime. And then he threw out a lifeline. By the way, I was thinking, maybe on the weekend the pier, Santa Monica, just for a walk. She lowered her gaze slightly. After filming, if I have time. They went their separate ways, she to her lamps, he to the garage. The box of protein stood on the workbench like a white cube with a secret. He sat down on a tire, pressed his forehead with his palm, and smiled to himself. Overnight truth delivery is not about bananas and sports nutrition. It's about secrets starting to knock on the door with baseball caps and courier apps. The phone shook a message from Matt. Well, did the box arrive? Shall we do an honest review? And brother, no sugar people can smell the fakery. Kevin typed a reply, it's here, and yes, no sugar. Then he added, "Looks like the office is already hunting for Greg," and deleted it, replaced it with, "I'll tell you tomorrow." Before turning off the light, he glanced once more at the lamp, at the tripod, at his own shadow on the wall wide, as if he had become larger than he was, and he realized that holding on to two lives would be increasingly difficult. The courier with the baseball cap had managed to deliver not only the box and Lindsay's delight, he had brought confirmation. The masks around him were multiplying, and honesty was the only way not to drown. Sarah's soft laughter came from above, not for the camera, but human. Kevin took a deep breath. Maybe it wasn't too late to slow down before the turn where revenge turned into a lie and growth into self-deception. But to do that, he'd have to start a conversation with her, not with her followers. He switched off the lamp. The darkness of the garage smelled of dust and rubber and new protein and banana, and something fresh, like an evening breeze, perhaps that there was finally room in the day for truth. First, it was a whisper in the statistics, red arrows pointing down, graphs like a beach after low tide. Then, comments under the video. "Have you seen Greg? He's got authenticity." And then thunder. Sarah turned on the camera in her home living room, put on a perfect smile, and couldn't hold it. "Guys," her voice wavered and shifted half a tone higher. "Let's call a spade a spade. Some stupid Gregfit is stealing my audience. He's hyping up my topics, my formats, and..." She inhaled and tapped her finger on the screen, "and he's gotten on my nerves with his spiritual speeches. This is fitness, not a self-knowledge club." The stories went in a series, headlines, caps lock, arrows, fire emoji. "Authenticity is discipline, not snot. Stop eating motivational quotes." Between the frames, her present flashed tired eyes, clenched jaw. But the algorithm loves rage. The reach flared up. Kevin's garage is a lamp, dust, and quiet laughter. Matt sits on a stool with a bowl of last night's chili, his phone vibrating story after story in his palm. "Dumb Gregfit," he drawled, almost dropping his spoon. "Brother, this is a golden button. Media judo. We don't make excuses. We don't respond by name. We take the topic and raise it above our heads." "Lifting?" Kevin asked again, although he already knew the answer. "Be yourself, even if they hate you." Minimalism. Black background, one light, one take. No brands, no shakers. You look into the camera. Don't talk to it, talk to those between you. Kevin leaned against the workbench. Somewhere beyond the wall, palm trees rustled. Guilt buzzed in his head. She was angry not just because the numbers were falling, but this was also an opportunity, not for revenge, but for the formula he had been living by for the past few weeks. Perfection is a filter, progress is you. "We're writing," he said. They turned off everything but one light. The camera on the tripod clicked. Kevin took a breath, remembered how his hands had shaken on the first day, and began. "You know what's funny? When you start being yourself, there will always be someone who won't like it. They'll say you stole, simplified, replaced. They'll be angry because your simplicity is a mirror of their complications. If you are hated, check the direction. Maybe you are finally going where it is scary. Be yourself, even if it is loud, even if someone slams doors, even if you are not someone's picture. Fitness isn't about abs or sculpting. It's about choosing to repeat, today, tomorrow, and 1,000 more times when no one is looking. You're not perfect. You're on track. That's more important. Stay the course." He stopped. No names, no jabs, just what he wanted to hear at 41, when the world was reduced to your yards, loans, and unspoken grievances. "Fire," Matt whispered. "No editing. Publishing now." The video landed on the feed like a coin on still water, and the ripples began. First, dozens of saves, then hundreds of forwards. Half an hour later, duets started flying. An overweight guy takes a breath to "Stay Yourself." A girl smiles through tears after a divorce. An elderly couple on the beach. He holds her elbow, and the caption, "Let's go." A comment from a school coach, "I'll show this to my boys." A comment from Tyler, "Lindsay said yes to my let's go together." Thanks, dude, in a PM, of course. The algorithm pulled up the psychotherapist's reflections, guitar fragments, and sustainability graph curves. By evening, Matt sent a screenshot. 1 million views. Brother, you're more viral than my chili. No embellishment. And Sarah has silence where it was always loud. Her response video verified, reasonable, with the C's about professionalism and qualities of a coach hung in the air like a poster on a damp wall. Under it, 100 comments were left saying, I agree, but 2,000. He's not talking about someone else's, he's talking about his own. In places rudeness that Kevin couldn't stand, in places sympathy that was painful for her to read. Sarah, give her a break. The subscriptions finally left in a stream to what you can't buy, to the feeling that you are being heard, not sold. David responded in his own style, a black and white photo of himself in the gym, the caption haters make gains, and the hashtag #BossFit. In the office, he walked past Kevin's desk, patted the back of his chair too hard, smiled too widely. Saw yesterday's motivation. Nice. By the way, the report is due by noon. Kevin nodded. A wave of familiar anger and strange calm rolled down his spine. He knew this virus had a price, and that price wasn't a number. It was there, up there, in front of the ring light. That evening, Sarah sat in the kitchen in silence, sipping water from tall glasses, as if cooling herself from the inside. Her phone lay on the table, her face unfiltered. Kevin placed a cup of Mr. Coffee next to her and sat down opposite her in silence. The warm light from the window made the house look like a set where the actors had forgotten their lines. Are you celebrating something? She asked suddenly, looking at him suspiciously closely. You're walking, as if you'd won a marathon. He wanted to shrug his shoulders, mumble something about the project. Instead, he squeezed out. Sometimes, when you do your own thing, you just sleep more evenly. Mine, Sarah repeated, touching the rim of her glass with her fingernail. And what's yours? Reports, or she didn't finish, but a thought flashed in her eyes, or the garage. He looked away. Her stretch bands were drying on a line by the window, and a magnet from Vegas. What happens in Vegas? Was on the fridge. Kevin thought the jokes about secrets had aged along with them. That night, his phone buzzed again and again. An invitation to a podcast, an offer from a small brand, no contract, just support. An email from the Long Beach School District to make a short video for the high school boys club. Matt wrote, we're on a roll. But bro, you gotta decide, is this a game or is this life? By morning, stay true had become a trending phrase. Mrs. Waller, the neighbor, stopped Kevin at the mailbox. I turned it on for myself in the garden. And you know, I planted the roses I kept putting off. She winked. Tell that, what's his name, that he has a very kind voice. He smiled and almost said, I'll pass it on. He held back. Note, it's hard to hide a kind voice when there are two of you living in the house. At work, Tyler whispered in the hallway. Lindsay cried, but the kind of tears that were good. She said that if her father had heard that at 40, a lot would have been different. He fell silent. Sorry if this is unnecessary. And yes, I didn't tell anyone. By evening, Sarah tried again. She recorded a long video about gatekeeping and personal boundaries, carefully not naming names. But the network had already decided to play a different game. Under her words hung the same stay yourself stitches. The feed turned into a quiet, I'm staying flash mob without hate, but with leaving. It wasn't an attack. It was voting with your feet. Kevin watched all this with Matt in the garage, glued to the same screen, like students coding a project all night again. It works better than I expected, Matt admitted, then added, frowning, and more painful than I expected. I didn't mean to, Kevin began. I know, but you started it, and now you're not the one in charge. The algorithm is. Matt put his hand on his shoulder. So let's at least stick to the course you yourself announced. Without dirt, without names. They nodded at each other like people making a pact. Kevin turned off the lamp, and in the darkness of the garage, he suddenly realized someone was standing in the doorway. Sarah, no makeup, wearing an old UCLA hoodie he liked to sleep in on weekends. "I'm here," she said, carefully stepping over the threshold. "I wanted to ask you not to take it off tonight. I'm tired." A pause. "And one more thing." She glanced at the walls, at the IKEA lamp, at the yoga mat with the slightest scratch along the edge, the same one left from when the box had slipped and burned a thread. Her fingers trembled. "This rug. Barely audible. It's mine." A thin ringing sound hung in the air, as if a spoon had fallen somewhere in the house. Kevin opened his mouth, but no words came out. Sarah looked up and met his gaze. Those eyes held everything at once: anger, resentment, fatigue, and something else, something vaguely resembling hope, as if she had finally seen not an avatar, but a living person. And she asked so quietly that it was almost lost in the noise of the ocean outside the windows. "Kevin, is that you?" "Kevin, is that you?" Sarah asked, standing in the garage doorway wearing his old UCLA hoodie. He inhaled, already preparing a yes, when a vibration exploded in his pocket. Then another, and another. The screen flashed like an alarm. "Matt 3 missed. Did you see that?" "I screwed up. Don't post anything." "Damn, that went to Maine." "What happened?" Sarah narrowed her eyes. Kevin took a step back and swiped the first video. There he was. A garage. He was putting on a funny brown wig for character testing, and laughing, chewing the air, rolling his shoulders, with a rubber chicken in his hands. The same one that Matt had brought as a stress reliever, and which Kevin had used as a warm-up for the video with the working title, "It's Okay to Be Awkward." A rough cut, filmed for a small group. And here it was a close-up. The chicken squeaked. The wig slid to the side. Filmed to relieve camera fright, he had once wanted to write under it. But there was no caption. There was only the absurd "publication complete." This, Kevin felt the blood drain from his face. Sarah silently pulled the phone out of his hand. A second later, her eyebrows shot up. "Oh my God." She looked up, surprise and joy mixed in her eyes. "So, it really is you." Notifications tore the screen apart. Greg in a wig, ABBA. Chicken, the new fitness bot. Anti-fitness satire of the century. Shame. Fake. The algorithm, as always, loved extremes. The phone lit up again. An incoming call from Matt. "Take it," Sarah said quietly. "You need it." "Brother," Matt yelled as soon as Kevin answered. "I uploaded it to a private channel, but I clicked publish. My hand twitched. I'm already deleting it, but it got there. The repost started. Sorry." Kevin closed his eyes. The funny wig, the rubber chicken, everything that had been the safe, human backstage had spilled out into the center of the stage. "It's too late," he said. "It's already trending." An hour later, the internet was buzzing. The hashtags #ParrotPress, #ChickenWarmup, #GregFake, and weirdest of all, #AntiFitnessSatire was trending. Some were cutting out 10-second loops of chicken squeaking and overlaying a beat, while others were making serious reels about how laughter is destroying the cult of perfection. Trainers were arguing, "This is a sham," versus, "No, this is demystifying." Under his previous "Be Yourself," a new wave emerged. From "This is what it means to be yourself" to "See, just a clown." The school district's letter was dry. "We have to postpone the collaboration until we get clearer." A small protein brand wrote more subtly, "We love you, but the situation is ambiguous. We're taking a break." David posted a story from the gym, "No wigs in my gym," and attached a laughing emoji. In the office chat, someone posted a chicken gif. Someone else, "Hang in there, Kev." Tyler wrote in a DM, "Lindsay said he's in pain right now, but I respect him even more. If you need me, I'm here." Kevin sat in the garage, looking at the lamp and the wig lying on the box like evidence. He picked it up and suddenly felt a childish shame, stupid and sticky. A rubber chicken was sticking out of the cabinet. He slapped it against his palm, and it squeaked empty, like a joke told too loudly. "Is this the end?" he asked the darkness. The darkness did not answer. Sarah, passing by, looked in again. Her gaze was different now, not triumphant, but studying. "Online, you're an adult," she said evenly. "But here," she nodded at the wig, "you're afraid to be funny, and you became one." "I'm afraid online too," he said honestly. She shrugged. "You know what's the strangest thing?" She smiled slightly. "Today I got some of my subscribers back. They write, 'Thank you for your professionalism. No masks.' And I think for the first time in a long time I'm not happy. Because this is not a victory, this is someone's failure. Yours, a pause, and mine too." He wanted to snap back, but he couldn't find the strength. He just nodded. By midnight, the internet had turned into a carnival. Memes were pouring out of every crack. Crocodile push-ups with chicken, wig squat in a metronome, reaction videos with laughter. But at the same time, there was a strange, serious wave. People confessed their funny fears. Someone was afraid of the engagement dance, someone of the first performance, someone of going for a run in their own weight. "Even if Greg is a living idiot in a wig, then I can be myself in my own yard," wrote one guy. This anti-fitness satire turned out to be liberating for some viewers. Sarah wrote down carefully, "Content is responsibility. Don't confuse discipline with a circus." Her likes went up. Comments, "We're coming back. Sarah, you're right." The statistics trembled in the plus. She walked around the house softly, almost soundlessly, but Kevin heard a slight spring of victory in her step. "Congratulations," he said in the kitchen, pouring water. "It's not a congratulation," she replied wearily. "It's as if someone turned off the hurricane for me and turned it on for you." He nodded, and suddenly a red router icon flashed on the wall of the room. Click, and the tape on the phone stopped stretching. Matt called. "You too?" he whispered into the phone. "The city is glitching. The provider is having an emergency. Restoration work is underway." A night without the internet, imagine. It's like someone gave you a timeout. Kevin froze. Without the endless feed, the house suddenly became quiet. Like after a snowfall, even the ocean sounded smoother. "The night the internet went down," he said, almost with relief. "Use it," Matt said. "I'm still guilty, but we can't fix it now. Sleep or talk." The connection was cut off. The screen said, "No service." A clock ticked in the silence, long forgotten behind the TV. Sarah stood by the window with a mug, looking out at the yard, where the lamp above the garage cast a yellow circle of light. "You want to know what the wig is for?" Kevin said, leaning against the doorframe. "Matt and I were testing the anonymous format, to talk about fear without a face, to make people laugh. With by us, not by over us, chicken to diffuse the first take. I was afraid, and from laughter it became easier, and then it became your shame." There was no salt in Sarah's voice, only a statement. "Online, yes, and now," he placed the wig on the table between them like a map. "Now, this feels like my only honest thing all day." She was silent for a long time. Then she touched her wig with one finger. "When I started, I had some awkward drafts too. I cried when I saw myself from the outside, and then I learned to live only with gloss. And," she hesitated, "and I lost something. Maybe you." The words were stuck in the air like dust particles in a lamp circle. "I don't know what will happen to us," Sarah continued, "but I know that the internet won't answer for us, even when it's there, especially when it's not there." "So," Kevin said, "no cameras today." "Yes," she nodded, "and without masks." They sat in silence. For the first time in months, in silence without a second screen. A dormant sprinkler whistled from the neighboring yard, and a late car drove by in the distance. Kevin felt the tight knot of shame and panic gradually dissolve in his chest. In this silence, the meme was just a mistake, not a death sentence. Before going to bed, he took the rubber chicken out of the garage and threw it on the grass. It squeaked in the darkness and fell silent. He suddenly laughed, quietly, without a nervous note. "Tomorrow they'll tear me apart," he said, closing the door. But today, no one is reaching out to me from the screen. Tomorrow is tomorrow, Sarah answered from the bedroom. And today, let's try to sleep. He lay down in his place and stared at the ceiling for a long time. Authenticity is also a mask if you wear it for likes, he thought. But if you wear it to breathe, maybe not. In the morning, the internet will return, and the meme will continue to live without its authors. Some viewers will stay for the sake of honest shame, some will leave, waving their hand, exposure. Sarah will gather part of her army and feel supported. Kevin will go out to the garage, look at the lamp, and perhaps will not press record. Or perhaps he will press it and say, "Yesterday I was a clown. Today a man. Choose who to watch." But that would come later. The night the internet disappeared gave them the luxury of scarcity air without noise. And in that air, for the first time, Kevin wasn't afraid to be funny, even without a wig, even empty-handed. David's house was like his Instagram. Everything was glossy. Everything was a little louder than necessary. There was a backlit pool in the yard, garlands over the palm trees, pyramids of champagne glasses on the bar, a cake in the shape of a dumbbell, hashtags in the photo zone, hash bossfit hash 45 strong. Music beat on the water, reflected on faces. Sarah walked next to him, light and collected, in a white dress that shone in the lights as if she had 10,000 likes for the evening again. Kevin was in a shirt and sneakers. He felt like an extra hero on someone else's stream. They hadn't agreed to go together. Sarah had suggested suddenly, in a quiet voice after that night without the internet. "Let's go. Without cameras. I want to see this live." He nodded. Maybe this was their common experiment, what people look like without filters. By the grill, office colleagues were arguing about that wig meme. By the pool, influencers were laughing. Each of them had already taken 3 stories with cake. Tyler was carrying trays. When he noticed Kevin, he nodded slightly and disappeared, his promise to keep his mouth shut still in effect. David came out to them with a glass, like the host of his own TV show, his polo shirt uncreased, his smile a white stripe. He put his arm around Sarah's shoulders loosely, as if they had been doing this for a long time, and turned to Kevin as if he were seeing him for the first time. "Oh," he said loudly so that everyone could hear. "Kev, what are you doing here?" His gaze slid over, assessing the sneakers. "Looks like your wife finally dumped that nerd. Are you with her?" He nodded at Sarah, keeping his hand on hers. The laughter all around was short, like a flash. Someone said, "Ooh." Something inside Kevin contracted and opened at the same time. For a second, all his "stay the course, one day, one win," all the runs outside the garage, all the words he said to strangers with kind voices, and not a single one he said to this man's face surfaced. Sarah froze. Something flashed across her face that Kevin recognized immediately. Not resentment, but calculation. She listened. "Careful, David," Kevin said calmly. "You're confusing likes with respect." "Oh, don't start," he waved it off. "Relax, we're celebrating." And with a squint, "Or are you still not over it in your chicken fit?" Someone snorted. Tyler froze at the bar, staring at the ice in the bucket. Kevin took a tall glass from the tray. The cold of the glass burned his palm, the bubbles scratched his throat before he could take a sip. He took a step closer. Not a fist, not a shout. He simply gently, without swinging, ran the thin edge of the glass across David's cheek briefly, with a clear ringing sound that resonated across the entire terrace. Not cut, not broken, a slap that left a wet, fizzy trail. The music stopped for a second. Someone ripped out the DJ cable, or the air itself paused. Phones flew up, but they didn't manage to catch the perfect shot. The moment was too lively. "That's for the nerd," Kevin said in the same even tone. "And for everyone you're used to measuring with numbers." He placed his glass on the edge of the table so precisely that the glass didn't budge. Don't confuse power with volume. David froze with a smile that could not change into another expression. A trace glistened on his cheek. He blinked for a second, then exhaled hoarsely. "Are you sick?" "I'm alive," Kevin replied. "Sometimes that's enough." He turned and walked away, past the counters, past the photo booth, past the eyes that clicked like shutters. Tyler took a step as if he wanted to say something, but only whispered after him, barely audible, "Stay the course." Those two words didn't hit Kevin, they hit Sarah. She stood at the edge of the pool, looking at his back, then at Tyler, who looked at her with respect. Inside, the pieces began to fall like dominoes. The garage lamp on the IKEA rug, the phrase, "If they hate you, check the direction," the warm timbre that can't be faked, Mrs. Waller's whisper about a kind voice, the way he paused between words, just like in those videos. And now, "Stay the course," their code mantra, uttered nearby. She caught up with Kevin at the gate. "Wait," she said quietly. "You don't have to, but I want to hear it from you." He stopped, rested his palm on the column. It responded with coolness. Behind him, the music turned on again. People were laughing again. David was probably already joking that champagne should refresh like that. In this noise, her voice was an island. "It's you," Sarah said without question. Kevin looked at her. The light from the pool jumped in her eyes, breaking up into short flames. "I am what I do in the garage," he said. "Not out of revenge. Not anymore. Because that's where I don't lie for the first time. To anyone." She stood with her shoulders slumped. There was no storm, only weariness and a strange relief, like breathing in after an underwater dive. "I probably knew," she admitted. "I just didn't want to know." And suddenly she smiled briefly, almost painfully. "A slap with a glass is your style," quietly and precisely. I tried to be gentle. He smiled with the corner of his lips, so that there would be no blood, just sound. "It was louder than you thought," Sarah said. "It's going to reach the office, the network, our house." "I know," he nodded, "but it's not because of the nickname anymore. It's because of me." The terrace door slammed behind them. People circled around the birthday boy again. A dumbbell cake was pulled out, and candles flared up in a steady battery. David joked loudly about wet congratulations, pretending nothing had happened. The party algorithm went on. "Let's go," Kevin said, "before this becomes someone else's content." "Let's go," Sarah agreed. They walked outside. The twilight smelled of pool chlorine, grill smoke, and the ocean in the distance. Sarah walked beside them, not touching their hands, but still closer than she had been in months. A school bus blared its horn on the corner, releasing drunk adults, suburban birds of paradise. Somewhere on their phones, captions were already being written that said, "Hot by the pool," but they still had a minute to go before they could publish. "You know," she said as they turned toward the car, "Stay the course isn't just about you. It's about me too. I've been aiming for perfection for too long. It's time for reality." A pause. "And for conversation." "For a conversation, yes," he nodded. "But not today. Today we have already spoken loudly." They got into the old Honda, the door creaking with the familiarity of a house that doesn't want likes. Kevin started the engine. The music from afar became the background. Sarah looked in the rearview mirror, and for the first time, she didn't fix her hair. She just sighed. "It's amazing," she said. "A pool party where everyone knows who Gregfit is, but they don't know who you are. And I finally do." Kevin smiled, not taking his eyes off the road. "Nice to meet you," he said. "I'm alive." The car moved off smoothly, and the light of the garlands was left behind like someone else's feed that you can scroll through. Ahead stretched the night street of Long Beach, quite enough for two people who finally have their own plot without witnesses. He got ready quickly, a duffel bag, a pair of t-shirts, work sneakers, a laptop in a soft case, a note in the kitchen. "We need air. I'm here if anything happens." He put the keys in a ceramic bowl by the entrance. It clanged dully, like a dot. Sarah didn't come out. Maybe she was sleeping. Maybe she was listening to him close the door. Matt's place was cramped and noisy, like a food truck kitchen. Frying pans, spices, jars of pickles, a laptop on the windowsill, a fold-out sofa instead of a guest seat. "Throw down your bag," Matt said. "Here's a clean towel. And listen, Maybe we should live for ourselves, without the must, without the content. Just live like a human being for a couple of weeks, not like a self-improvement group. Kevin nodded. For the first time in a long time, he hadn't set up a tripod because there wasn't one. The phone landed face down and stayed there. The next day, he went to work at a construction site Matt's friend was recruiting people at a site near a canal. Nothing heroic, the foreman explained. We carry, pull, tighten. We pay on time. From reports and zoom to a concrete mixer and a screwdriver, the transition turned out to be strangely logical. Where one mistake would be a letter for 5 chains, here it was just aligning, tightening, checking the level bubble. The body woke up differently, not from an alarm clock, but from muscles that responded with simple, understandable pain the next day. His palms became rough, his back straightened. By midday, he caught himself being silent, not composing a voiceover, not constructing phrases for the video, just moving. And inside it became quieter than any do not disturb mode. In the evenings, he and Matt ate something simple: rice, baked chicken, a salad made from whatever was cheap at the market. Matt, looking at Kevin, grinned. Look, the Gestalt press is not locked in a cell, but in bags of cement. And then, more seriously, if you come back without playing God. You're alive, that was enough before. A week later, Kevin took the day off to pick up a couple of boxes from his house. Old paper photos, a couple of shirts, some cords. He drove up in the afternoon when the street was nodding in the heat. Sarah warned him with a text message. I'm on a shoot. Come in and get it. He parked the Honda at the familiar curb. It already seemed foreign and therefore honest. Mrs. Waller was fussing about at the gate with her pruning shears, her straw hat, her bucket of water. She looked up and spread her smile. Kevin, honey, you look taller, she said, looking at his shoulders. Or maybe my roses have drooped. The roses are great, he replied. I've moved for now. I'm staying with a friend. I heard, she nodded. In their area, rumors traveled faster than the post office, but from her it sounded like, I'm nearby, not like, I know. Come in for tea, or are you in a hurry? He hesitated for a second. 5 minutes, he told himself. 15, his fatigue answered. On the veranda, there was a familiar teapot, a plate of cookies, and the smell of baked goods that knew no hashtags. She placed a mug of lemon in front of him and sat down opposite him, placing her pruning shears on the edge of the table. You disappeared from the internet, she simply noted. Yes, he chuckled. I'm trying to live without witnesses. Wise. Although, she bowed her head, I still watched you. Really? He raised his eyebrows. You said it wasn't about that. Oh, Kevin, she waved her hand. My grandson showed me how to look. I even saved them. The one with one day, one victory, I used to play in the morning when I couldn't bring myself to open the barn. And that funny one, with the wig and that chicken. I laughed out loud, and then I thought, this is the real thing. He put his mug down. Really? Stupid. Real is when you're not afraid to be stupid, Mrs. Waller said. When it's funny, and it's shameful, but you're not hiding. You were real, even in your stupidity. That's why people followed you. Not because of your abs, because you're alive. And, she smiled toward the roses, a kind voice. The words hit somewhere between his collarbones, as if someone had taken off not a camera, but a shutter. He remembered his first video without editing, how his hands were shaking, how he wanted to re-record, how he left a pause, and how this pause then lived on through thousands of forwards. Mrs. Waller, it turned out, was his best algorithm. No charts, no targeting, direct subscription to a person. Thank you, he said simply. I thought it was all worth something while the feed was going up. But when they made me a meme, I stopped believing in myself. A meme is French fries, she chuckled. Delicious and unhealthy. And you are the soup on my stove. Necessary, but not so spectacular. Let yourself be soup, Kevin. The world will not die without your perfect shot. He laughed, from relief. You know, he said, I've been working on a construction site for 2 weeks now, without thinking about content, and suddenly I realize that I'm calm, not happy calm. Peace is also a holiday, she replied, but not everyone knows how to celebrate it. They sat talking about simple things, about how a fox had stolen a chicken from the neighboring yard. A real one, not a rubber one. Mrs. Waller winked about how Matt's barbecue had turned out well, even though he had oversalted the ribs, about how old paper photos smelled different from digital ones. A schoolboy with a chalkboard walked past the gate. Someone was watering the lawn, the ocean whispered from afar. It was the same suburbia, only without filters. "Are you going back to the video?" she asked as she left, handing him a container of cookies. "For Matt, but take half for yourself." Kevin shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe yes. But if I come back, it won't be for the numbers. For..." He searched for a word and found her phrase for the soup. She laughed. "Then promise. The first video, no music. Just you and your kind voice. And no chicken. Although," she thought, "okay, let it be. If it's funny." On his way back, he stopped by the construction site to pick up some gloves he had left on a beam. The foreman saw him and said, "I like you long. You don't talk trash." It was the best comment of the week. That evening at Matt's, they ate rice and vegetables and were silent. Then Matt said, "You know what's weirdest? You became more beautiful when you stopped trying to look better." "A morning without a camera does wonders," Kevin replied. "Maybe I should live like that." Or maybe, Matt picked up his fork, "just remember that a camera is a screwdriver, not a god. Turn it on, unscrew it. Turn it off, put it down. That's it." At night, Kevin took a notebook out of his bag, a real one, a paper one. He wrote, "A voice that one person hears is loud enough." No likes, no reposts, just him and ink. The morning promised to be simple. Coffee in a thermos, gloves, a screwdriver, rafter ribs, sun over the canal, and maybe after the shift, tea at Mrs. Waller's. He smiled to himself. Living for yourself does not mean living alone. Sometimes one viewer is enough to return to yourself. The phone was propped up against a mug of tea in Matt's kitchen. No lights, no microphone, no music. In the background was a frying pan, a bag of rice, and on the windowsill, a pot of basil that had barely survived. Kevin sat down opposite, as if interviewing himself, and pressed record. "Hi, I'm Kevin Long," he said. "No aliases. Revenge is a bad coach. It only pumps up pride and fatigue. I was Gregfit. I started out of resentment, and I stayed because I started telling the truth for the first time. I lied along the way to you, to Sarah, to myself. It's not just the one who puts on a wig who hides. It's the one who's afraid to be ordinary who hides." He took a breath, let the pause ring out. "Sorry. For playing the riddle. For staying silent when I should have spoken. For turning loved ones into plots. I'm not a hero. My hands are shaking. Sometimes I want to run away to the garage and never come out. But if I'm teaching someone to stay on course, I'll start with myself." He smiled briefly. "This is my last video as Gregfit and my first as Kevin. Next up will be the Relman Recovery Channel. Not about abs, about trust, pain, mistakes, and male vulnerability, a word we run from like a dentist's schedule. There won't be perfect takes. Sometimes there will be silence. If you need it, stay. If not, thank you for being there. And yes, revenge is a bad coach, but honesty is a good physiotherapist. Stay the course." He turned off the recording. No edits. No screensavers. He unloaded it and, against his habit, put the phone face down. The internet exploded silently like a snowfall, without "scandal" in the headlines. People shared as if it were something useful to send to one specific friend. "This is growing up. I'll show my son." "I'm Sarah in my story, forgive me, husband." "I'm Kevin in my garage." The algorithm suddenly became human. Instead of screams, long texts. Instead of memes, confessions. Sarah saw the video in her car, in the studio parking lot. She watched until the sorry part, and for the first time, she cried so hard she had to turn off the headlights and just sit there. They weren't tears of defeat or anger. They were water that melts ice. She texted him a quick, "Thank you." Then another, "Proud of you. No, come back." And he texted back, "You too, stay the course." At first, David's office pretended nothing was happening. Then a letter arrived. The company has activated an internal investigation procedure into a complaint about the manager's unethical relationship with female employees. Matt, who once edited at night, used the internal hotline as a supplier he had access under a contract to shoot for the corporate blog. He collected everything he knew and saw: screenshots, correspondence, invitations to individual training with hints. Tyler helped to formalize it correctly without bile, with facts. A week later, the company newsletter dryly read, "David Hines is no longer with the company. We thank him for his contributions." There was not a single emoji reaction under the letter. Zero. Emptiness was the loudest assessment. Tyler wrote to Kevin, "Not for you. For Lindsay and everyone else." Kevin replied, "I know. Thanks." Kevin didn't go back to Sarah. They met at a cafe by the ocean. No cameras, no complaints. They talked about bills, about the house, about who should pick up the mail when. "In the end," she said, "you didn't find your voice with me. It hurts, but it's right." "And you're one of us," he replied. "I can hear him. He's real when he's not on the air." They hugged awkwardly, like people who were still important to each other, but no longer for each other. Relman recovery started without fanfare. The first video was at Matt's table: how to ask for forgiveness without making a show of it. The second was at lunchtime on a construction site, wearing a hard hat: the fear of being weak, a user's guide. The third was on Mrs. Waller's porch: how to listen without correcting. She brought tea and cookies, sat on camera, and said, "I'm not an expert, I've just lived longer." This became their formula: instead of opinion leaders, witnesses to life. The comments were short and to the point. "Today I told my son I was scared. Went to the therapist. Called my dad." Subscriptions grew without leaps, like muscles from normal work, smoothly. Marketers wrote letters, "Let's integrate," but Kevin was in no hurry. He wrote himself a rule with a marker on cardboard and pinned it to the wall: "No deals if it's noisy inside." In one episode, he reread a note from his notebook: "A voice that one person hears is already loud enough," and added, "if it's you." In another, he admitted that he still reaches for his phone when he's in pain, and promised viewers a week of honest silence. And he really was silent. Instead of a video, he posted a black screen and one phrase: "Today I'm living, not filming." Sarah signed up for Relman Recovery under her own name, without likes or comments, just to know he was staying the course. Sometimes she'd send an episode to her followers as must-watch for spouses. Her own content changed: fewer poses, more breathing between sets, the body as a tool, not a showcase. The churn was replaced by a steady backbone of support. She recorded a video called "When You're Not the Motivator at Home" and ended it with, "I'm learning." Matt returned to his experiments, now not only in the kitchen. He edited Kevin's rare videos, but more often he just sat next to him in the kitchen while he wrote the outlines of new episodes. Living for yourself turned out not to be about loneliness, but about choosing the obvious: eat, sleep, call a friend, take a shower, apologize. Mrs. Waller became the channel's first subscriber. In each video, he inserted a short advice to Mrs. W. Once a month, they sat on the veranda and sorted through letters from 40-plus men. She would say, "You're not broken, you're tired. Fatigue isn't cured by likes." And it hit the mark more accurately than any ad. Sometimes Kevin would return to the garage, which was already a stranger's. He would stop at the gate, look at the familiar lamp, at the door that he had once closed like a box of masks. At such moments, he would repeat out loud, "Revenge is a bad coach," and move on to the channel, to his shift, to the cafe, to the people who have no subscribers but have breath. One night, Tyler texted him, "Lindsay asked me what male vulnerability was. I showed you your episode. Then we had a fight and made up. Thanks." Kevin replied, "You said that. I just said it out loud. At the end of the month, he turned on the camera again, this time on his channel, just to mark the milestone. No intros, no sales. He sat on a stool, pulled his knees up and said, I didn't go back to Sarah. I didn't go back to Gregfit. I went back to myself. Sometimes that's the only comeback that makes sense. If you're watching this and still think vulnerability is weakness, try one simple thing. Today, tell the truth to one person you're afraid of losing. Not for a like. For both of you. Stay the course. He turned off the recording. In the kitchen, Matt turned the cutlets over. The basil on the windowsill smelled unexpectedly bright. Behind the wall, a regular clock ticked, the kind that doesn't chase anyone's trends. Kevin smiled. For the first time in a long time, it wasn't the video that went viral, but the feeling. You can live without an image. And that's enough. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.